What if I told you that there was an NHL goalie who was amazing in the regular season but somehow couldn't stop choking when it mattered most? From incredible regular season shutouts to his painful Game 7 meltdowns, Roberto Luongo was truly one of the greatest goalies in NHL history, and his highlights are honestly some of the best you'll ever see. But how did he become so good that he could dominate everyone for years? And why did this incredible goalie always seem to fall apart in the playoffs? Well, to find out, we have to go back to the early 2000s. Roberto Luongo, a young goalie from Montreal, whose family had moved to Florida when he was young so he could play better hockey, thanks to the fact that his father Fabio had sacrificed everything to give his son a chance, had already shown he was special. You know, I was nervous as hell, Luongo would later say about those early days. I'm thinking, these guys are expecting me to be the savior, but I'm just a kid who wants to stop pucks. The pressure he felt during those first few seasons was crucial because it was setting up a pattern that would follow him his entire career. Yet this pressure would only fuel Roberto's incredible rise because the young goalie had something that coaches had never seen before. During his rookie NHL season, Luongo wasn't just stopping pucks, he was stopping pucks that had no business being stopped. On March 24th, 2001, against the Philadelphia Flyers, the 21-year-old would showcase exactly why NHL teams were already calling him a future Hall of Famer. Not only did Roberto make 41 saves that night, but he did it in a way that left even opposing players shaking their heads, and his teammates were starting to believe they had found their franchise goalie. Kenny Janssen, the Islanders' veteran defenseman, would watch Roberto during practice and see something special. This kid would make saves in practice that we'd never seen before. He'd be sliding across the crease, and somehow the puck would just stick to his glove like magic. But it wasn't just his reflexes that impressed everyone, it was his confidence. During a timeout in a game against the Colorado Avalanche, with the Islanders down by 2 goals, Roberto skated over to his teammates and said, "Don't worry about it. They're not scoring on me anymore tonight." He was right. The Islanders came back to win 4-3, and suddenly, everyone in hockey was talking about this young Italian goalie who seemed to have ice water in his veins. After being traded to the Florida Panthers in 2000, Luongo spent several years putting up incredible numbers and carrying a team that had no business being in the playoffs. When the Panthers finally made it back to the postseason in 2007, everyone expected their young superstar goalie to take them on a deep run. But on April 11th, 2007, something happened that would haunt Roberto for the rest of his career. Game 1 against the New Jersey Devils was supposed to be Luongo's coming out party. The 26-year-old had been lights out all season, and Panthers fans were already dreaming about their first Stanley Cup. But with 7 minutes left in the third period and Florida leading 2-1, everything fell apart. A routine shot from Scott Gomez somehow found its way past Roberto's glove, a save he'd made hundreds of times during the regular season. "I don't know what happened," Luongo would say after the game. "It was right there and I just missed it." But that wasn't the worst part. 3 days later, in Game 2, with the series tied and the Panthers desperate for a win, Roberto would let in a soft goal. A harmless wrist shot from the blue line that somehow squeezed through his pads, and you could see the look of shock on his face. The kid who had been so confident all season suddenly looked lost. "The pressure got to me," he admitted years later. "I went from thinking I was invincible to questioning every save I made." Florida would lose the series in 5 games, and for the first time, people started wondering if Roberto Luongo was just a regular season goalie. Yet Roberto wasn't going to let one playoff failure define him, because what happened next was absolutely incredible. During the 2003-04 season with Florida, Luongo put together one of the greatest regular season performances by a goalie in NHL history. Not only did he post a 2.43 goals against average on a team that could barely score, but Roberto also recorded 7 shutouts and a .931 save percentage, numbers that most goalies could only dream of. Roberto was literally the only reason we won any games that year, Panthers forward Olli Jokinen would say. And the numbers were backing up what everyone was seeing. On February 18th, 2004, against the Boston Bruins, Roberto made 53 saves and a 2-1 victory, including 23 saves in the third period alone. But it wasn't just the quantity of saves, it was the quality. Diving glove saves, pad stacks that defied physics, and somehow always being in the right position, even when his defenseman left him out to dry. The 2005-06 season would be even better. Roberto had 35 wins despite playing for a Panthers team that finished with just 85 points. His 2.97 goals against average was incredible considering the team in front of him, and he set a Panthers franchise record with 4 shutouts. During one stretch in January, Luongo went 8 games without allowing more than 2 goals, carrying Florida to victories they had no business winning. Roberto was playing a different sport than everyone else, Panthers coach Jacques Martin would later recall. Night after night, he was the best player on the ice, and it wasn't even close. Yet every time the playoffs came around, something would always go wrong. However, everything would change for Roberto on June 23, 2006, when the Vancouver Canucks made one of the biggest trades in franchise history. Florida had decided they couldn't afford to keep paying Luongo the money he deserved, so they shipped their superstar goalie to Vancouver in exchange for Todd Bertuzzi, Alex Auld, and Brian Allen. But this wasn't just any trade. This was Vancouver betting their entire future on one player. "We believe Roberto Luongo is the missing piece," Canucks general manager Dave Nonis announced at the press conference. "He's going to take us to the Stanley Cup." Canucks fans went absolutely crazy. Season ticket sales jumped, and Roberto's jersey became the top seller in Vancouver before he'd even played a single game. The media was calling it the trade that would change everything for a franchise that hadn't won a cup since, well, never. "This is our Patrick Waugh moment," one Vancouver newspaper wrote. "Luongo is going to be the goalie who finally brings Lord Stanley to British Columbia." Roberto's first season in Vancouver proved all the hype was real. During the 2006-7 campaign, he posted a 2.29 goals against average and 5 shutouts, leading the Canucks to their first playoff appearance in 3 years. But more importantly, he was doing it with style. On March 10th, 2007, against the Detroit Red Wings, Roberto made a diving glove save on Pavel Datsyuk that left the entire arena speechless. "I've been watching hockey for 40 years, longtime Canucks announcer Jim Robson said, "and I've never seen a save like that." His teammates couldn't believe what they were seeing either. Roberto was making saves that video game goalies couldn't make, forward Daniel Sedin would later say. "We all thought this was finally our year." But when the playoffs came around, the same old Roberto showed up. Against the Dallas Stars in the first round, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Game 1 seemed perfect. Vancouver was leading 2-1 with 5 minutes left, and Roberto had been solid all game. Then Mike Modano fired a shot from the slot that somehow went right through Luongo's legs. "That's a save I make 100 times out of 100 during the regular season," Roberto would say after the game. But for some reason, when the playoffs start, everything feels different. Game 4 was even worse. With the series tied 2-2 and Vancouver desperate for a win at home, Roberto let in a soft goal, a harmless wrist shot from Stefan Rabaidas that squeezed between his arm and his body. The camera showed Roberto just staring at the puck in his net, and you could see the doubt creeping back into his eyes. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he told reporters after Vancouver lost the series in 7 games. "I feel like a completely different goalie in the playoffs." The Vancouver media, who had been calling him a savior just months earlier, were now questioning if the Canucks had made a huge mistake. Yet Roberto would get one more chance to silence all his critics, because the 2010-11 season would be different. The Canucks had built the best team in franchise history around their star goalie, and this time, everything seemed to click. Vancouver finished first in the entire NHL with 117 points, and Roberto posted a 2.11 goals against average with 5 shutouts. But most importantly, when the playoffs started, Luongo looked like a completely different goalie. Against the Chicago Blackhawks in the first round, he was absolutely incredible. Game 7 in Vancouver was supposed to be another Roberto collapse, but instead, he stopped 31 shots and finally beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. "This is the Roberto we traded for," Canucks captain Henrik Sedin said after the game. "He's playing like a man possessed." The saves kept coming in the next round against Nashville. A sprawling pad, save on David Legwand, a glove robbery on Martin Arat, and somehow always being in the right spot when the Predators had their best chances. Vancouver swept Nashville 4-0, and suddenly, Roberto Luongo was 2 wins away from the Stanley Cup Final. "I've never felt this confident in the playoffs," he told reporters. "Everything feels different this year." When the Canucks beat San Jose in 5 games to reach the final, Roberto had posted a 1.85 goals against average in 17 playoff games. Vancouver fans couldn't believe it. Their goalie had finally figured out how to play in the playoffs, but then came the Boston Bruins, and everything Roberto had worked for would come crashing down in the most painful way possible. Games 1 and 2 in Vancouver went perfectly. Luongo was sharp, making the saves he needed to make, and the Canucks had a 2-0 series lead. "We're 4 wins away from the Stanley Cup," Roberto said after Game 2. "I can taste it." But when the series shifted to Boston for Game 3, something changed. The Bruins scored 8 goals in Game 3, and Roberto was pulled after allowing 4 goals on 16 shots. "I don't know what happened," he said after the game. "I felt good in warm-ups, but when the game started, nothing felt right." Game 4 was supposed to be Roberto's bounce-back game, but instead he allowed 4 more goals and was pulled again. For the first time in his career, Luongo had been pulled in back-to-back playoff games, and the Vancouver media was going crazy. "Is this the same goalie who got us here?" one newspaper asked. The worst part was Game 7 back in Vancouver. With the Stanley Cup in the building and 18,000 fans desperate for their first championship, Roberto played well enough to win, but Boston scored with 7 minutes left, and Vancouver's dreams were over. After the game, you could see Roberto crying in his crease, and he would later say, "This is the worst feeling I've ever had. We were so close, and I let everyone down again." However, Roberto wasn't going to let this heartbreak end his career, because what happened next showed just how mentally tough he really was. During the 2011-12 season, with Vancouver fans still angry about the Stanley Cup loss and media constantly questioning his playoff ability, Luongo put together one of the greatest regular season performances of his career. He posted a 2.41 goals against average and 6 shutouts, leading the Canucks to another division title. People don't understand how hard it is to bounce back from that kind of disappointment, former NHL goalie Curtis Joseph said. Roberto showed incredible character by playing that well after what happened in the finals. Year after year, Roberto kept proving that he was still one of the best goalies in the world when the playoffs weren't involved. In 2013-14, back with the Florida Panthers, he posted a 2.46 goals against average and 6 shutouts at age 34. Roberto is still playing at an elite level, Panthers coach Gerard Gallant said. He's saving us 10 to 15 goals a season with saves that other goalies can't make. Even opposing players couldn't help but respect what he was doing. Luongo is one of the best goalies I've ever played against, Boston's Patrice Bergeron said in 2015. He might not have the cup ring, but he's still a Hall of Fame goalie in my book. The numbers backed it up too. Roberto would finish his career with 489 wins, 77 shutouts, and a .919 save percentage. Numbers that put him among the greatest goalies in NHL history. Yet Roberto wasn't ready to give up on his Stanley Cup dream because at age 35, he made a decision that shocked the hockey world. On March 4th, 2014, Luongo waived his no-trade clause and returned to the Florida Panthers, the team where his NHL career had started 14 years earlier. "I want one more chance," he told Panthers general manager Dale Talon. "I know I don't have many years left, but I still believe I can win a championship." It was a huge risk. Florida hadn't made the playoffs in 3 years, and most people thought Roberto was crazy for leaving a good Vancouver team for a rebuilding Panthers squad. But something amazing happened in Florida. Roberto wasn't just good, he was vintage Luongo again. During the 2015-16 season at age 36, he posted a 2.35 goals against average and led the Panthers to their first playoff appearance since 2000. "Roberto's been our rock," Panthers captain Derek McKenzie said. "He's playing like he's 25 years old again." The saves were incredible too. Diving glove robberies, impossible pad saves, and somehow always being in the right position. On February 23, 2016 against the Islanders, Roberto made 38 saves in a 1-0 shutout victory, including a save on John Tavares that left the entire arena speechless. "I've never seen anything like that," Islanders coach Jack Capuano said after the game. "Roberto stole that game from us." When the playoffs finally came, Roberto was ready. Against the Islanders in the first round, he looked like a completely different goalie than the one who had struggled so many times before. Game 1 was a 32-save shutout, and you could see the confidence in his eyes again. "This feels different," he told reporters. "I'm not thinking about the past anymore. I'm just playing hockey." Florida would win that series in 6 games, giving Roberto his first playoff series victory since 2011. "It feels amazing," Emmy said after the clinching win. "I thought this day might never come again, but the magic couldn't last forever." In the second round against the Islanders, Father Time finally caught up with Roberto. At age 37, his reflexes weren't quite what they used to be, and the Islanders scored some goals that a younger Luongo would have stopped. Florida lost the series in 6 games, and you could see in Roberto's face that he knew his championship window was closing. "I gave everything I had," he said after the loss. "Sometimes that's just not enough." The 2016-17 season would be Roberto's last real chance at a cup run. Florida had built a good team around him, and at age 38, he was still playing at a high level with a 2.68 goals against average. But the playoffs never came. Florida missed the postseason by just 1 point, and Roberto knew that his championship dreams were probably over. "It's hard to accept," he said near the end of that season. "I've been chasing this cup for almost 20 years, and I'm running out of time." On June 26, 2019, Roberto Luongo announced his retirement from the NHL. He had played 19 seasons, won 489 games, and been one of the greatest goalies of his generation. But the one thing he wanted most, a Stanley Cup ring, would forever be missing from his trophy case. Roberto Luongo was truly one of the greatest goalies to ever step foot on NHL ice. Watching Luongo, especially during his time with Vancouver and Florida, It almost seemed like he physically couldn't lose a regular season game. And while everyone remembers his playoff struggles, the real truth is that his regular season dominance was simply incredible. By making saves that no other goalie could make and carrying teams that had no business being good, he was able to have a Hall of Fame career even without that Stanley Cup ring. When you look at the numbers, it's hard to argue against Roberto's greatness. 489 career wins, 77 shutouts, and a .919 save percentage over 19 seasons. Those are numbers that put him among the best goalies in NHL history. He carried the Florida Panthers for years when they had no business making the playoffs, and he took the Vancouver Canucks to their first Stanley Cup Final in 17 years. Roberto was one of the most talented goalies I ever played with, former teammate Henrik Sedin said after Luongo's retirement. He could make saves that defied physics, and he did it night after night for almost 2 decades. But maybe that's what makes Roberto's story so interesting. He showed that you can be great without winning everything. His regular season performances were legendary, his longevity was incredible, and his ability to bounce back from disappointment was something every athlete can learn from. Roberto Luongo proved that sometimes being great isn't about the trophies you win, it's about how you play the game and how you handle both success and failure. And in that regard, Roberto Luongo was as great as they come. By the way, let me know what you think below. Does Roberto Luongo deserve to be in the Hall of Fame even without a Stanley Cup? Do his regular season numbers make up for his playoff struggles? Please share your thoughts below. I would love to hear them. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more hockey content. These videos take countless hours of research and editing, and many sleepless nights to bring you the best stories in hockey history.